So I'm sure by now many of you have seen the survey by YouGov that basically they asked men how they identified as masculine or feminine. And they asked, women as well if they identified as more feminine or more masculine. And it's interesting. You can see, actually, I'll link the survey in the description, but you can see that as the men get younger, they become less masculine. And it's not because they're older that they feel more masculine. It's basically the time they grew up in. So you look at men who are 65 and older, 56% identify as completely masculine, 50 to 64 is 32%, 25 to 49, 21%, and here's the best one, 18 to 24-year-old men, 2%. 2% identify as completely masculine. That is pretty horrifying, actually. That's frightening. So how did masculinity get castrated this way? Well, that's a good question. I've got some thoughts on it. Okay, so if you look at the other part of this survey, they also surveyed these people to find out whether they thought of masculinity as a positive or a negative term, or label, I guess you could say. You look at 65 and older, 73% say it's a positive term, 50 to 64, 64% say it's a positive term, 25 to 49, 61% say it's a positive term, and you get to 18 to 24, 39% say it's a positive term, but how many say it's negative? 42%. So more men age 18 to 24, these are men we're talking about here. More of them think that being a man is negative than the ones who think it's positive. That's crazy. That's completely insane. So if you are a human being, think about this for just a second. You're a human being. Imagine if more humans thought it was negative being human. It was a bad thing. It was an evil existence just to be human. I mean, just let that sink in. That's crazy. How could you possibly be productive? How could you be confident? How could you be happy if you thought you were a negative force in the world? I just don't see it. I don't see how you could possibly be happy if you thought that your existence was negative. I don't know. I don't really know what to say. And the crazy part here is that with women, I shouldn't say the crazy part, there's a lot of crazy parts. With women, their results are pretty similar, but the women who are age 18 to 24, it's basically flipped as far as the ones who think it's positive and the ones who think it's negative. More women age 18 to 24 think masculinity is positive than men. 42% of the women surveyed say it's positive, 27% say it's negative. I mean, that's still a lot, but they're the minority at least. So 42% of women say it's positive, 42% of men say it's negative. So what happened? Well, no one, went out and beat these men up with, baseball bats saying, you better not be proud of masculinity or you'll get this again, you'll get another beating. You know how when you were a kid you were told that sticks and stones may break your bones but words will never hurt you? Think about this. Does anybody really believe that words can't hurt you? I mean, there are a lot of weapons out there. There's a lot of ways to physically hurt people. But does anything have a greater power, a greater capacity to harm than words? Not really. If you've read some books like, say, 1984, you'll see that the entire oppression of that society basically come down to manipulation of words. I mean, they even had their own, newspeak terminology, doublethink, all these are manipulations of words. There wasn't really that much violence in that story. I mean, there was violence, obviously, but almost all of the oppression occurred through words. That's how they kept people down. Maybe they used violence to get to where they were, but they kept it there by using words. And words have a way of creating a domino effect. So, at first, women say want equal rights. They bring up a lot of good points. A lot of people get on board, support it, but then maybe it cascades a little bit. Maybe it snowballs. Maybe the pendulum swings a little too far. So you get to equality and, well, you got that momentum going. You can't just stop in the middle. The pendulum keeps swinging. And I think that's where we are now. We're at the other side of that pendulum. It swung. The weight that was necessary to get it moving was just too much inertia, too much power. It just kept it swinging too far, and here we are. We're at this point now where 2% of men identify as being masculine, and more men find masculinity a negative label than those who think it's positive. And don't get me wrong, I don't think the pendulum swinging too far is necessarily women's fault. The women's rights movement was kind of co-opted by Marxism. It's not a tinfoil hat theory, people. It's well documented. Do a Google search. That's all you need to do. But the majority of women, I think, are very reasonable about this sort of thing. It's just not in women's nature to put themselves on the line, speak up. Some women do that, and that's fine. That's great, actually. That's some of the most inspirational people that have these sorts of messages are women, so that's great. But generally, the speaking out, putting yourself on the line, taking fire from everybody, that's more often a man thing. And we don't see a lot of men doing that anymore. Now, you see some guys here on YouTube who are making a pretty good name for themselves actually just talking out against this sort of thing. And that's great too. Those people are the ones who inspired me to start making videos. I hope people will like my videos. Maybe I'll inspire some other people to start. There's not many of us left, guys. We really need to do something about this. Imagine what another couple of decades will do. I mean, if we plummeted to 2%, what are we going to look like in another 20 years? Is it going to be 1%? It can't get much worse. Do we really want to find out what society will look like if even more men find masculinity negative? Do we not have enough self-hate already? People hate themselves for being white. Are we going to hate ourselves for being men? Is being a white man going to be about the worst thing known to man? Or are we going to just be born ashamed? Everybody around us is going to tell us how ashamed we should be. And maybe, and this is what we don't want. What if there are no men that they're able to see, to show them otherwise, to show them, hey, this man is proud of being a man, and he makes a lot of sense. He's talking about the things that I feel. I'm not crazy. These are the things that I've been thinking. Everyone's told me I've been crazy. Everyone's told me I've been evil. Everyone's told me I've been selfish. I've been a misogynist. I've been a racist. But this guy, or this woman, in a lot of cases, they're saying things that I think, that I appreciate. These things apply to me. And we want those beacons of heroism to be out there for people to see. And I think that's how we got this far. That's what got us here. There was plenty of men around, and they chose to do nothing. They sat by as their sons were abused, verbally abused. They were called names. They were told they were worthless. They were criminals. They were rapists. They were misogynists. They're patriarchs. That all men are rapists. How did you expect them to grow up? What did you expect them to turn into? What did you expect them to think of masculinity? What did you expect would happen? So, really, who's to blame for this happening? Well, men are. Ultimately. Of course, there are political ideologies that played a role. A lot of women played a role in it. But, guys, nobody made you roll over and die. You chose to do that. And it's time we stop